Let's try to say something nice about the Banzuke committee. They made this breakdown a lot more colorful. Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. The July 2025 Banzuke is out, and if you haven't seen it yet, oh boy, we have things to talk about. If you have seen it, then you already know, oh boy, we have some things to talk about. I often say we have some things to talk about, but this time, truly, I am starting to understand what it means to have some things to talk about. So let's go talk about some things. Let's start at the top and just get through the easy stuff because this goes off the rail quickly. Hoshoryu was the Yokozuna. He goes Yokozuna 1 East again because Onosato is the new Yokozuna. So he goes to Yokozuna West. We'll see what order they're in next time. Kotozakura is the only Ozeki, so he goes to Ozeki 1 East. There was the question as to whether Daisho and Kirishima would switch spots, but in fact Daisho stays at Sekiwake 1 East and Kirishima at 1 West. Wakatakakage, with his 12 wins at Komusubi, goes to Sekiwake 2 West, and Oshoma, as expected, moves up to Komusubi 1 East. And now it starts to get fun. Takayasu, 6-9 at Komusubi 1 East, just shifts over to Komusubi 1 West. A lot of people thought Aonishiki, who was 11-4 at 9 East, would in fact get this spot. Now, does it make sense for Takayasu to go ahead of Aonishiki and keep that Komusubi spot? Yes, absolutely. It makes perfect sense for that to happen. So why did everybody think Aonishiki was going to get that Komusubi slot instead? Well, it has to do with history, and I've said it enough times on this channel, history does not necessarily relate to the decisions they make now. However, this is the number of times, these are the example times of when somebody who was 6-9 in the Sanyaku, doesn't matter, Komusubi or Sekiwake, stayed in the Sanyaku. Yeah, that none. It's never happened. Even if you go way back, like I like to say, only go back to 2004 if you're gonna do, any history checking at all, because it got really crazy before that. But even if you go all the way back, 6-9 at Komusubi or Sekiwake got you booted out of the Sanyaku every single time before now. This is a genuine first. There's not many of those left. It's hard for them to find actual firsts, but they got one here. Takayasu goes from Komusubi East to Komusubi West with a 6-9 record. The people who got this right are probably the ones who know the least and just go off of vibes. And sometimes that's what happens. This is why I tell people they should play this game. It doesn't matter if you know a ton or you have time to study the Banzukes of the past and see what decisions have been made before. Sometimes they make us, who spend a lot of time on this stuff, look like idiots. Again, this move makes sense, but nobody who actually researches this thought it was going to happen because it's never happened before, and there were better times to do it in the past than this occasion now. But yeah, Takayasu retains his Sanyaku slot. Aonishiki is going to have to do some work at High Maegashira to earn the Sanyaku slot next time, if he can do it. The upshot is that anybody who thought Takayasu was going to be at 1 East, now they're absolutely right about Wakamoto Haru, Oho, and Abi. All of them drop back a half a rank with their 7-8 records. That makes perfect sense. Similarly, Onokatsu and Kinbozan, they slotted in very nicely at Maegashira 3, so they just are going to land there. Everything's good. And now for the next little bit of a head scratcher. This one, again, it makes sense, but it's still surprising. Hakuoho was 8-7 at Maegashira 7 East. So for him to go up to Maegashira 5 would have been 2 slots. That's an over promotion for 8-7. And you had Tamawashi and Hiraumi, who had been in the Joy. They were 6-9, and they were at Maegashira 3. So if they drop to Maegashira 4, that's a rank. Now we have seen in the past that the committee sometimes will bump guys who go, 6-9. Really, let's just make it a little more broad. They'll bump guys down a little bit further if it looks like they think they're not getting enough of a demotion, even if they're in the Joy. So for the most part, guys who have been in the Joy have gotten a little bit of preference on these decisions, but if they need to get pushed down further, that sometimes looks like the primary consideration of the Banzuke committee. And that seems to be what happened here. So now Tamawashi is going down 1.5 ranks with his 6-9 record. Hiraumi also 1.5 ranks with his 6-9 record, and then Hakuoho is the beneficiary. I think this is a really important thing to think about when you wonder why they make these moves. I am 98% sure they decided Tamawashi and Hiraumi needed to get pushed down further, and Hakuoho by chance benefited from that. This had nothing to do with wanting Hakuoho to go higher up the Banzuke. This was a decision made about other guys. He just happened to get caught up in that mix. It goes against a lot of the decisions they've made recently, but again, this one does make sense. It's not illogical. It's just gone against recent tendency. Now, this one is a little more surprising. Meisei and Takeru Fuji. Meisei was 9 and 6 at 10 East. So if he went to 6 East, that's going up 4 ranks. Again, that's an over-promotion. Takeru Fuji was in the Joy. It was towards the bottom, but he still had to run that whole gauntlet of Sanyaku guys. I'm sure it was disappointing for the committee and everyone in the JSA to watch, considering how hyped he is. Nonetheless, a rank and a half demotion is usually considered acceptable for a 6-9 record. Again, I don't think this was about pushing Meisei up, and rather it was about making sure Takeru Fuji went down further, although I'm not entirely sure why they felt the need to do that. Maybe they were thinking, okay, Tamawashi and Hiraumi, we're bumping them down another half rank compared to what we need to, and Takeru Fuji was right behind him, so, let's just bump him down a little bit too. We'll make it look what counts as symmetrical for this thing. It's the best guess I have. This one is a little strange, but again, not completely crazy. There is a logic to it. It just, again, has gone against recent tendency. But now we get to Gonoyama, and this is where, all right, so I said Tamawashi and Hiraumi and Takeru Fuji, it looked like, all right, the committee just wanted to push them down further. Now, they were in the Joy. They were, if we look at their records, Tamawashi fought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all 7 members of the Sanyaku. Hiraumi fought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all 7 members of the Sanyaku. Takeru Fuji fought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all 7 members of the Sanyaku. So even though Gonoyama was a higher rank, he fought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh my god! He only fought 6 members of the Sanyaku. Now, I'm not saying that they should treat Gonoyama as having had an easier schedule and actually treat him worse than those other 3 guys, but at most he should be treated on the level as those 3, right? So why the hell, if you look on the side, he went 4 and 11, and we expected him to go down 5 ranks, which is already a pretty decent under demotion. That's 2 ranks of under demotion. We expected Tamawashi and Hiraumi to get under demoted by 2 ranks, and that didn't happen. They got pushed down further. We expected Takeru Fuji to get 1.5 ranks of under demotion. He didn't get that. He got pushed down further. So why in the world did Gonoyama only get moved down 4 ranks with his 4 and 11 record? Why did Tobizaru get bumped down further with his 7 and 8 record? Okay, yeah, they've been trying to bump down the 7 and 8 guys a little bit, but this one doesn't make any sense at all. If you're gonna prioritize these guys coming up from the mid ranks, Hakuoho, Meisei, over guys who are in the Joy, and then you've got somebody who was around those mid ranks who should absolutely be higher than a guy who was in the Joy, why is this the time that the guy who is at 2 West, Gonoyama, ends up getting bumped further up? For that matter, why did you bump Gonoyama up and not Endo? Why isn't Endo the one who got that spot in front of Tobizaru and you just leave Gonoyama at 7 West? After all, Endo was 9 and 6 at 11 East, so mathematically he should have been at 8 East. Gonoyama was 4 and 11 at 2 West, so that puts him at mathematically at 9 West. Endo earned, if you think of it that way, a rank and a half ahead of Gonoyama. Why is Gonoyama ahead of him? Okay, Tobizaru earned a spot 2 ranks ahead of Gonoyama, but if you think Tobizaru has to get moved back, fine, just move him back. But why isn't Endo the one taking the spot? Endo was 1 rank behind Meisei. They had the same record, but now he's 2 ranks behind Meisei. That's the Banzuke, that happens, but in this case, it doesn't make any sense at all. Why is Meisei getting pushed ahead of a guy who fought the whole Sanyaku, but Endo can't get ahead of a guy who fought almost the whole Sanyaku and did a lot worse? This is where the logic breaks down, and this is where we get really frustrated with the friggin' rankings sometimes. Again, the Takayasu thing, unexpected, but it makes sense. Hakuoho, unexpected, makes sense. Meisei, definitely unexpected, still makes sense. But then if you take the logic that they're using, even if you assume that they changed the logic from Banzuke to Banzuke, if you're expecting them to at least maintain some kind of, basic form all the way through one given Banzuke, this doesn't even hold from one rank to the next. It makes... Alright, you get the point. It doesn't make any sense. This one just... I know I make jokes about these guys drinking, but seriously, what? They're not allowed to smoke weed, and what other explanation do you have for this? They went from Yokozuna to Maegashira 5, then they took an hour-long sake break, and then they came back to do the rest. Really? It's improbable, and yet it is still the most likely answer to why this happened. Anyway, going on to something where I'm just gonna I've stopped caring about if I'm right for the wrong reasons. I'm just gonna be happy I was right. Sadanoumi ends up at 8 East in large part because of all of this craziness. The question was really, was he gonna end up ahead of Gonoyama and Ichiyamamoto or behind them? I thought, hey, maybe they'll move him just in front because of the relative rank thing. What they ended up doing was putting Gonoyama in a completely unexpected position and then just saying, yeah, Sadanoumi should go ahead of Ichiyamamoto. And if you want to see someone else who got screwed, Ichiyamamoto kind of got screwed. Really, everybody in relation to Gonoyama got screwed, but they were mathematically tied. Again, they both mathematically landed at 9 East because Ichi was 5 and 10 at 4 West, and now he's 2 ranks behind Gonoyama. There is no good reason for this. And I say that despite the red name coming up next, Chiyoshoma. What the hell is going on here? Why did they suddenly decide to be so nice to guys with 4 and 11 records? Again, Chiyoshoma, 5 West, 4 and 11. 5 West is not in the Joy. Chiyoshoma, not required to fight Sanyaku opponents. He did end up fighting Takayasu, but that's because Takayasu was also doing terribly. We talk about preference for guys in the Joy because they fight the Sanyaku. Well, losing to one Komusubi who's also doing terribly at the end of the tournament really doesn't earn you any brownie points. And yet, we were expecting him to land at Maegashira 11. We were expecting him down here. And the reason why they put him further up, it's none. There's none. It's not there. There isn't a reason. Just as a reminder, here's the math. We've got Atami Fuji at 11 East. We've got 2 guys at 11 West. Then we've got Toki Hayate at 12 East. And then, well, I guess I got to clear these out. And then we've got Chiyoshoma and Midori Fuji and Asakoryu at 12 West, mathematically. Now, I did think Chiyo was going to end up ahead of those 2 guys, but there's no reason. Again, higher rank, but not really a more difficult schedule the way they think about it, which is Sanyaku difficult, everybody else, whatever. And yet, he ended up ahead of all 4 of these guys. They ended up in the same order that was expected. If we look at the prediction, we have Atami, and then Roga, and then Takanosho and Toki Hayate. They ended up in the expected order. But why the hell is Chiyoshoma up here? Leave a comment. I don't care if it's a serious idea or a complete joke idea. I think all the ideas are joke ideas at this point. And I'm not even upset because I'm mad about a sports ranking system. That's whatever. Real life is way more important than that. But it's the logical break. It's things that don't make sense. It doesn't matter if it's not important. If it doesn't make sense and I can't find a way to make it make sense, those things bother me. This is one of those things. This doesn't make sense. Yeah, the other 4 guys were going to get over promoted a bit, but so what? The only thing I can think of, and this has just kind of wormed its way into my head as I've been ranting, is that, okay, so the relative ranking thing is basically because somebody else got added to the Sanyaku, every rank in terms of, overall order of the guys on the Banzuke is essentially a half a rank below what it was. So if you didn't see the Guess the Banzuke, the short version is, so last time Maegashira 1 East was number 8, but now there's 8 guys in the Sanyaku, so now it's number 9. It's the same numbered rank, but it's a half slot lower. So if you go up 2 ranks, it means you've basically gone up 1.5 spots compared to everybody else, okay? Now, if they were really hell-bent on making sure the 8 and 7s got a minimum promotion, so they only went up 1 rank in a relative sense, that would be the only reason to make Chiyoshoma go ahead of all of those guys. Then you've got Atami Fuji, who only goes up essentially, so 2.5 ranks is, relatively speaking, 2 ranks, and now, because he got bumped back further, that's only 1.5. Takanosho and Toki Hayate, well, now it's just, relatively speaking, +1. And they've done +1 for 8 and 7 guys. They've tried to make a point of that at times in the recent past. But why now, and why give Chiyoshoma such a boost to make it happen? Like, how did that become their priority all of a sudden? That's the thing that doesn't make sense. Why did this become so important to them now? It's utterly mind-bending. It's like they wanted to push one guy down, but then they're like, well, if we're gonna do one, we gotta do everybody. I guess, maybe. That's the best idea I have. Still, leave a comment if you've got a better one or a funnier one, cause nah! I messed up. I called an audible in the Guess the Banzuke video. I slid Midori Fuji behind Asakoryu. I had him ahead of him like the whole time. I should have left him there. That was my mistake. Oops, but they were tied. Asakoryu went up 5 ranks. I mean, it makes enough sense. Oh, and the other one that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Churanaumi was 4 and 11. Okay, 4 and 11 at Maegashira 7 West. Mathematically, he goes down to 14 West. Shodai, he was 6 and 9 at 10 West, so he should drop to 13 West. Now, Shodai had a losing record. He was 6 and 9, right? Churanaumi had a losing record. It wasn't like they wanted to push a guy with a winning record ahead of a guy with a losing record. Oh, let's give the successful guy the bump, whatever. It's not like they were comparing a guy from Makuuchi and a guy from Jurio. If you ever hear people talk about the Banzuke, people who have been doing this for a while or paying attention to the sport for a while, and they talk about how guys who had really bad records often were saved a massive demotion. They kind of got the drop softened a little bit, even though that hasn't happened hasn't happened so much in the last couple of years. This is what we're talking about. Churanaumi 4 and 11, man, that's a pretty big drop. Well, let's just make it not so bad and we'll bump Shodai a little further back, even though really Chura should be behind him. That's the kind of thing they would do in the past. But that has not been a thing recently. If you do badly, you just eat that meal. You just drop. Whatever you go down, whatever you're supposed to go down, you go down. And if you get saved some number of ranks, you just got lucky. Now, did they do it because the other 4 and 11s were getting saved a bunch of ranks as well? It's the only thing I can think of. Even though it's not really like them to say, well, these 4 and 11 guys are doing badly, so we got to make the other 4 and 11 guy do just as badly or not that badly or whatever. Like, you end up where you end up. For Chura to end up ahead of Shodai, again, makes no sense. I had Kusano at 14 East initially, I bumped him to 13 West, but the reason I was willing to do that was because never in 1,000 years did I think Churanaumi was going to end up ahead of Shodai. Like, if that thought even momentarily crossed my head as even a flicker of a possibility, I probably would have predicted Kusano at 14 East just to be safe. But since it just looked like it was a question of who goes to 13 West and who goes to 14 East, Kusano or Churanaumi, honestly, it's starting to look like they made a couple decisions and then they were like, wait a minute, that was weird, but if we did that thing, we got to do this other weird thing. Oh, we did those 2 weird things. Well, man, now we got to do this other weird thing or none of it makes sense. It's like, you could just go back and redo it. But if ever there was a group of people on this earth who I would expect to be like, nope, that part's done, we're not touching it again, it's the freaking Banzuke committee. So Churanaumi's at 13 East for no reason ahead of Shodai at 13 West. Kusano reasonably is at 14 East. And then Fujinowaka, who is Wakai Ikari. By the way, I didn't know he changed his name. I didn't see that anywhere. So I see this dude's name on the Banzuke. I'm like, who the hell is that? This one ended up exactly as expected, and I still got screwed up by it because I'm like, I don't even know who this guy is. Was he in Jurio? When did he show up? I had to look at his freaking picture to figure out what was going on. But thankfully, okay, this was the expected guy to land at 14 West. Kota Shoho, Hidenoumi, Kaio. I was right about Mitakeumi. It was theoretically possible he would get bumped back, but not behind Kotoeho, and I ended up getting this one wrong too. I really did end up thinking that Kotoeho would end up at the back of the line, but Shishi, this is the logical choice. I'm a little surprised they made the most logical choice, but this was a logical choice. Kotoeho, 17 East, Shishi, 17 West, and of course, when everything else goes to hell, that's the time when all of the Jurio promotions go in totally logical order and make sense. Okay, that's the Banzuke for July 2025 broken down. Oh my god, I am actually sweating right now. Leave a comment if you can explain literally anything, or if you've made equally terrible decisions and how many mind-altering substances it took to get you to make those decisions. Other than that, got a fun video that took longer than expected, but that should be out pretty soon. Tier list gonna be pretty soon. And then hopefully one other thing between now and the start of the Basho. So look for that stuff. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.